Open your Bibles to Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12, you see that in the slide behind me, behind you as well. We're going to read verses 13 through 21 in just a couple of minutes, so keep your finger there. When Terry and I were first married, we had our first home in Abilene, Texas. And the reason why we moved to Abilene is Terry had completed her master's degree at Texas Tech. She was offered a very nice job at the West Texas Rehab Center in Abilene. So we moved there. I did not yet have a job in Abilene, had to find something to do while she was working. It wasn't too many weeks into that process where one of Terry's co-workers approached her to talk about a part-time job that he did in the evenings and on weekends and such. And in reality, he didn't want to talk to Terry so much about the part-time job. He wanted to talk to me, because he knew that I didn't have a job yet. And basically what he was doing was he was selling life insurance. I had never really even thought about that. But it was interesting to find out more information. So Terry and I and this coworker from the rehab center, we went to an orientation meeting on a Tuesday night. And the guy who did the recruiting talk talked about what the work was and what expectations and so on. And then he did something kind of interesting. He reached into his pocket, he pulls out his wallet, and he pulls out a paycheck. And he says, now I want this back, haven't put it in the bank yet, but I want you all to pass it around and look at the amount of money that's on it. And it was a check for over $5,000. Now this is 40 years ago, okay? $5,000, and he said that was for 1 week's work. And if you did what their company told you to do, that you could possibly make that kind of money as well. I don't remember now why I did not sign up to sell life insurance. I didn't, but I can remember that night. I went home and did not sleep very good. Can you imagine? I'm an unemployed new husband, and I see this paycheck for $5,000. I'd never made that much money in my life at that point. And I had visions in the night of sports cars and big houses and all the best of everything. And what I didn't realize at the time, but what was happening, was I was beginning to deal with the sin of greed. Now, greed had never really been much of a problem in my life. My mom and dad took good care of my brother and me. We were a middle class family. Didn't have a lot of extras, but we always had food on the table, always had clothing, and Dad saved up for vacations, and we normally went to Grandma's house and that sort of thing. Both of my parents watched what I spent my money on. I was able to, buy some albums in those days and that sort of thing. And what I didn't have, I really just didn't need. But greed can get a hold of you. And let me tell you something, friends. As Americans, greed is especially strong, because we have so much wealth in this nation, so many opportunities to buy things. And as Christians, we are not exempt from greed. A Christian can be very greedy for the things that other people might have or the things that they might want to have. And we have to be very careful about the sin of greed. And that's basically what this passage is talking about. Hope you have found Luke chapter 12 in your Bible. Let's read this passage together, beginning in verse 13. Here's what God says to us this morning. Someone from the crowd said to him, now that's Jesus, said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." "Friend," he said to him, "who appointed me a judge or arbitrator over you?" He then told them, now I want to point out, he's talking to one guy, now he's talking to everybody. He says, "Watch out and be on guard against all greed, because one's life is not in the abundance of his possessions." And then he told them a parable. A rich man's land was very productive. He thought to himself, "What should I do since I don't have anywhere to store my crops? I will do this," he said. "I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones and store all my grain and my goods there. Then I'll say to myself, 'You have many goods stored up for many years. Take it easy, eat, drink, and enjoy yourself.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, who will they be?' And that's how it is with the one who stores up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God." May God always bless the reading of his word. If you look closely at this passage, it seems to indicate the man who is the focus of this discussion with Jesus. He's got a brother, probably an older brother, because in Judaism, when your parents died, the money, the estate was passed on to the children, to the boys, by the way, not the girls, but to the boys. And the oldest one would get 2/3, or I should say this, would get an extra share of the inheritance. Now, if there's only two, as it appears to be in this text, then the older brother will get 2/3 of the estate. The younger brother will get 1/3 of the estate. And apparently the older brother was not doing what he was supposed to do. He had not yet divided up the parents' estate with his younger brother. So he hears Jesus is coming to town, so he goes to see if he can get Jesus to help him. Maybe Jesus can order his brother to do this. And it's interesting, Jesus says to him, "Who appointed me as a judge or arbitrator over you?" In other words, Jesus is saying, man, this is not my job. This is not what I'm here to do. There were courts in Judah in those days that had judges that would do this exact type of, negotiation or this, case. Jesus says, that's not why I'm here. But then he does something else. Jesus realizes that the man's real problem is not the fact that mommy and daddy's estate has not yet been divided up. His real problem is in the heart. The man was full of greed. So Jesus also adds to everybody listening, watch out. Watch out and be on guard against all greed, because one's life is not in the abundance of his possessions. I want to begin this morning, before we get into this parable, by talking about the sin of greed. If you're following along with sermon notes that we've prepared for you, and if you didn't know we did that, we do. They're on the table right before you come in. Gave you a little space to write a definition of greed. The Greek word that is used here for greed is a combination of two words. It's the word more and the word to have. So basically what greed is that you want more stuff that you can have, all right? Sometimes it's translated as covetousness. Sometimes it's translated as, in this case, as greed or greediness. The basic meaning of these two combined words simply is the love of money. When you love money more than you love God, you're dealing with greed. If you might be wondering at this point if greed is something that's affecting your life, let me suggest to you 4 questions that you might do a little self-evaluation with. The first one is this: do I think more about material things or more about God? Now, obviously, you're here at church, you came for Bible study, you came for worship, you're focused on God, and that's great. And tomorrow when you're at work, you need to be focused on your job. That's important too. But when you're relaxing, maybe this afternoon or tomorrow evening or whenever you're just taking it easy, what do you think about? Is your thoughts focused on God and what God's doing in your life, or you tend to think about the things that you have, the toys that you play with, the tools that you have, whatever it might be? What do you think about? Second question that helps us evaluate whether or not greed's affecting our life is this: do I ever compromise my godly character in the pursuit of material gain? Now, obviously, if you're at work, you need to be thinking about your job. And I want to point out that material gain, whether it be toys or money, is not necessarily bad. Okay, that's not sinful. But how you obtain the things, the toys, the stuff that you own, that can be sinful. Let me give you a couple of examples. Do you ever take something that doesn't belong to you? Now, obviously, we would say, I would never do that. But what about simply taking like pens from work or something small that nobody else is going to miss? But you didn't earn it. It wasn't gifted to you. But you put it in your pocket and you took it home nevertheless. Or what about the possibility of cheating in some way at work in order to get a pay raise or a promotion? Maybe you pad the hours that you worked on a project, or you build the company you're got the contract with a little bit of extra. See, these are ways that we can, compromise our godly character. We should never do that under any circumstances. Here's a third question: do you enjoy material things more than you enjoy knowing God? Do you enjoy material things more than you enjoy knowing God? Simply put, what gives you joy in life? Is it the hobby that you have? Is it reading a book? Is it whatever it is? Or is it God? There's a lot of things that make us happy that are not necessarily good. So what brings you joy or makes you happy? Number 4, how do I respond when I lose something, okay? I guarantee you, at least once a week in my house, somebody's saying, could you call my cell phone number because I can't find my cell phone? Now, I know that never happened to you guys, but it does in our house quite often. All right? How you react when you can't find something, whether it be your cell phone or a missing shoe or whatever it is, if you stress out over that, then chances are you're more focused on the greed of the stuff than you are on God. Just some things to think about here. Now, this parable that Jesus tells following these words with this individual deals with a man who is called foolish. Foolish is not an easy word to use. We're warned away from that, in fact. But let me show you some reasons why this man is called foolish. And by the way, I just want to point out these subpoints here found in a commentary by Bob Dufflenbaugh, I think is how you pronounce his last name. But the filler stuff is from me. Just wanted to point that out. Number 1, this man failed to recognize where his wealth had come from. He failed to recognize where his wealth had come from. Notice how many times in this parable the man refers to himself. Just give you one example, verse 17. He thought to himself, there's two right there, what should I do since I don't have anywhere to store my crops? If you go back and read this whole passage, I counted 11 times in my translation he refers to himself. And not once does he ever refer to God. All right? Now, wealth in and of itself is not sinful, okay? God does not condemn having money. But how you obtain the wealth, what you do with that wealth can be sinful. Now, this man did not sin in how he obtained his wealth. Apparently, he was a good farmer. He was fortunate that his land was productive, rich soil. But he didn't consider the fact that his skills as a farmer were given to him by God. What skills do you have? Now, don't do one of me. I like to say I don't have any skills whatsoever. I have no skills. No, we all have some skills. Maybe your skills thinking, and you work in a desk, and you in an office, and God bless those people. Or maybe your skills with your hands, and you work, you build things, or you fashion things, whatever it might be. Thank God for those kind of people also. But do you realize, my friends, that it is God who gives you the ability to think? It is God who has blessed your hands with the ability to do things. We need to recognize, as this man did not, that the wealth that we receive is a gift from God. That God blesses us with the ability to work and to work hard. And this man does not look to God and says thank you to him. Another reason why he's considered foolish is that he erred in his understanding of the purpose of wealth. He erred in his understanding of the purpose of wealth. His purpose was purely selfish. He says to himself, take it easy, eat, drink, and enjoy yourself. Now, those things there are not necessarily sinful. But when they become the totality of our purpose in life, then you've got a real problem, ladies and gentlemen. And that's what's going on in this man's life. He did not give God credit. He did not involve God in his purpose for living. It was all selfish. Third, he saw his possessions as his security and as the basis for his ceasing to be productive. Now, it's apparent that this man is going to retire, or at least for a while. He says here, what am I going to do with all this crops that I've got growing in the field? I don't have any place to put it. Well, he's going to tear down his barns that he has. He's going to build new barns, and that way when he harvests the crop, he can have a place to store it, and he's going to have so much stored up that he can then take life easy. He can retire. He can, eat, drink, and be merry and enjoy his life. And again, there's nothing wrong with retiring, okay? But what we do with our time, whether we are actively working or whether we have reached retirement years, shows where our heart is with God. Because if we retire and give God no time whatsoever, what does that say about us? Or maybe we retire in order to be able to go on mission trips like the youth mission trip and help Chad out. Or maybe we retire to go on the Builders for Christ trip. Or maybe we retire so that we can go on the Costa Rica mission trip. Or maybe to spend more time working in church, being a Bible teacher or serving on a committee, or whatever it might be. What you do with your time, both now and in the future when you retire, says a lot about where your heart is. This man has no plans for a mission trip. He has no plans for ministering to others, no plans to use his wealth in order to bless other people who may not have as much as he does. And so he is considered foolish by God. He's also considered foolish because of his presumption. This man presumed that his wealth is going to last. I hope it does. I hope if you have saved up money for your retirement, I hope that it lasts. But has anybody ever heard of the 1929 stock market crash? It happened. A lot of people lost their money, okay? There's no guarantee, even if you put money in banks, that money's always going to be there. Now, obviously, up to $100,000, it's supposed to be insured. You should be able to get it back if the bank fails. But my point simply is this: there's no guarantee. There's no certainty this man's money is going to survive. But there's another way to look at this also, friends. There's no guarantee this man is going to survive. Now, my dad used to joke he hopes to write his very last check on his last day on earth. You know, you've heard that joke, okay? We need to save our money and plan for retirement. We need to, invest our money in other people and ministries and so on. But there's the possibility, as happens to this man in this parable, that this very night our life may be demanded of us. I hope you live to be 100 years old, or maybe even beyond that. All right? But what are you going to do with your life? Get into that more in just a few minutes. This man also apparently doesn't realize that one day he's going to stand in judgment before God. And God's going to look him in the eye and say, what do you do with your life? And he's going to be able to say, well, I built bigger barns to store all my wealth, and boy, I had a great time. God says that doesn't count. You didn't do anything of an eternal value. This man had nothing to say because his life was so selfishly wrapped up in himself. One more thing about this man being foolish, and that he was a fool in both the ways he defined life and in the way that he thought about life was obtained. And basically I'm saying the same thing here, but think about it as Americans. Ladies and gentlemen, our country tells us that he who dies with the most toys wins. You ever seen that bumper sticker? I've seen it. He who dies with the most toys wins. Somebody came up with another bumper sticker that said, he who dies with the most toys is still dead. I like having some things to play with. Nothing wrong with that, okay? But that's not what life is all about. That's not what life is all about. Go back to that night, in that meeting in Abilene, Texas. I dreamt of, sports cars, driving a Ford Mustang or a Porsche 911 Carrera. A couple things I like to see on the road, okay? Being in a big house. For some reason, yachts fascinate me. I know I'm never going to own one. Don't really care if I'm ever even on one, but they fascinate me, okay? It's a way of spending your money. And that's what America says. If you spend your money and you buy these fancy cars, you have this fancy clothes, then you've been successful, you've been a winner. But that's not what God says. God asks us to spend our life in Him. This man does not do that. And before we go on to the next point, I want to point out something here, ladies and gentlemen. Nowhere in this passage, in fact, nowhere in the Bible, does God ever condemn wealth. Nothing wrong with having money. Nothing wrong with a bank account or even a nice size house or fancy car. Nothing wrong with that. The question, though, really is, how do you get it and what are you doing with it? if it's all about yourself, it's all to make you comfortable, to make you look good to others, then you got a real problem, folks. But if you're using the money that God's given you to advance God's kingdom here on earth, then when you stand in judgment before God, you do have something to say. That you have used the blessings that he has given you to advance his kingdom here on earth. I want you to look at the very last verse of our text today, verse 21, if you still have your Bibles open. Look what Jesus says. This is how it is with the one who stores up treasure for himself and is not what? Rich towards who? Rich towards God. That's what I want to conclude this message about, is talking about how we can cultivate richness towards God. Now, there's at least 3 lessons from our passage here today that deals with cultivating richness towards God. And the first one is this: we all have a choice about how we invest our lives. We all have a choice in how we invest our lives. This man here in this parable, his investment first and foremost was in his land, in growing the crops and building the barns and then building bigger barns and making himself happy, making himself wealthy, making himself pleasurable. Okay? If that's all you're doing, then you got a serious problem with greed. God doesn't condemn having food, having clothes, things like that. But when those become the totality of our being, then there is a problem there. Second thing is the world's perspective on how to invest our lives is at odds with God's perspective. The world's perspective on how to invest our lives is at odds with God's perspective. You know, the world tells us, buy the sports car, buy the bigger house, enjoy yourself with your wealth. But God, what does God say? God says to use your money to bless other people, to help others. When I do premarital counseling with a couple, I always say this: I'm going to tell you to do something, and I've never once had a couple take me up on it. But I'm going to tell you in just a moment how you can take away the number 2 reason for divorce. And by the way, this works for people who've been married a long time. The number 1 cause of divorce, adultery. But I'm talking about the number 2 cause of divorce, and that's financial problems in the family. If you'll do what I'm about to tell you, it'll take away number 2 completely. Here's what it is. I then asked the couple, who makes the most money right now? The man or the woman? Normally it's the guy, but sometimes it's the girl. Whoever makes the most money, that's what you live on for the next 4 years. The person who makes the least amount of money, take that money and invest 100% of it. Invest it all, just put it in a savings account, or maybe CDs or whatever. But put it in the bank, save it. And in 4 years, you'll have $100,000 saved up. Now imagine what you can do with $100,000. Now I'm not saying go out and spend that money. But if you have $100,000 in the bank, you don't ever have to take out a loan to buy a washing machine or to buy a car or to do a lot of things that cause young couples to fall into debt. By saving money up, you are protecting yourself and your marriage against the second cause of divorce. Now, this is contrary to what our country tells us to do. Our country says, spend money, buy a big house, buy fancy cars, buy fancy clothes, go out to dinners, go out on the town and have a good time. We Christians have got to guard ourselves against that lie. because the success of our life is not found in what we do for ourselves, but what we do for others and for God. Don't make the mistake of believing that you can serve the world today and then you can serve God in the future. I hear Christians make that mistake. What I mean by that is, today I got kids at home, I got to save for their college education, got to put clothes on their backs, so on. I'm making as much money as I can. I'm working hard. I want that pay raise. I want that job promotion so I make more money. It's about the now. And when I retire, then I'm going to serve God. Then I'll get busy in the church. Then I'm going to do this and this for God. Don't make that mistake, ladies and gentlemen, because you don't know that you're going to be here when you retire. It's possible that you're never going to change. Yeah, maybe you will, but I'm pretty sure most Christians won't. In other words, you're going to continue doing today what you will do in the future. And if you can develop some financial disciplines today, they'll pay dividends down the road, and you can bless others through that. The last thing about cultivating richness towards God is to recognize that our life success is found in Jesus Christ. Literally, I put up there, to invest your life successfully, deposit it with Jesus Christ. I challenge you to do something this afternoon. You can listen to me, but do this afternoon. Sit down for a few minutes and answer the question, what makes your life successful? If you go to the end of your days, maybe you're 95 years old, and you look back on your life, or maybe it's even tonight, you look back on your life, what makes your life successful? Here's a couple of ways. You can consider success in terms of the number of years that you live. You know, my dad was 91 years old when he died. Both of his parents were 94. You know, my dad had an aunt who was 105 when she died. Do you think a long life by the number of years is successful? Well, okay, take good care of yourself, eat good food, exercise, see your doctor, and so on. But the problem is you cannot control how long you live. You just can't do it. Yes, you can take steps for a long life, but ultimately that's God's decision when you check out of this world. So that's not a very good way of defining success. Another way of defining success in life is in terms of how much money you make. Now, we've been talking about this a little bit today, but here's the point. You know, you can work hard and maybe you still don't make that much money as far as an American is concerned. By the way, I did a little research this week in my office, and I assume the website I checked out was correct, because I know you can't put anything that's not true on the internet. But according to this one website, the median world family or household income is the way to put it. The world household income average is under $10,000 for a year. What that means, ladies and gentlemen, is we are all wealthy. We are all rich compared to the world. Okay, because I guarantee you the poorest in our church family still makes more than that. But if that is how you define your success, well, good luck. I hope you make lots of money. But what if you run into problems? What if the nation goes through something like another COVID pandemic and people lose their jobs? You lose your job and you struggle to make income. That's not a good way to define success in life. All right, here's another way. You can define your success in terms of how happy you are. And I know a lot of people that pursue happiness. They want to have the things of this world and the nice cars, the big houses, the toys to play with, whatever it might be, gives them happiness. Well, fine and dandy. But what if God were to tell you today, I want you to follow me, but you're going to suffer along the way. I want you to be my disciple, but it's going to be a heartache and you're going to struggle. Would you still do it? For you see, my friends, joy and happiness, that's not what life is all about. Sure, I want to be happy. I don't mind having a good time. But that's not the totality of who we are. As I look at the scriptures, the only way of defining success in life is in terms of your life with Jesus Christ. For your wealth is going to fade away. There's no promise of joy in your life. There's no promise that you're going to live a long life. But if you will invest your life in Jesus Christ and spend your days learning to know Him more and more, and to give your life to doing what God's Word tells us to do, then I guarantee you, my friends, when you get to the end of your life, whether it be when you're 29 or 99, your life will have been a success. Don't be like this individual that Jesus tells a parable about whose only thought was for himself, for the pleasures that he's having. Yes, I realize some of us are struggling. I get it. Some of us are hurting. What's more important is God does too. God never promises us an easy life, but He always promises us to be with us, regardless of how painful this world may be. It is my prayer today, my friends, that each of us would recognize the importance of Jesus in our life more than anything else. And that if we will spend the rest of our life focused on Him, whether our life right now is young or whether we are in the twilight years of our life, you can't change what's happened in the past, but you can live the rest of your life for Christ. And whether that be 6 months or 60 years, you can get to the end of the life and know that you contributed something to God's kingdom. And that's my encouragement to you today. Don't pursue wealth that does not last. Don't pursue happiness that does not last. Don't pursue popularity or anything else. Pursue Jesus Christ. And at the end of your days, you'll be glad that you did. Brother Steve, would you come up here as we get ready for our invitation? Friends, where are you in regards to this issue of greed? Are you spending your day seeking the material things of this world, things that don't last? Or are you focused on God, who is eternal, and one day you'll stand in front of Him and give an account of your life?